Hello everyone, this is the second in the series of lack of davening on Shabbos, and the last time we were together we spoke about the fact that davening on Shabbos consists only on the surface of praise, of thanksgiving, but no request. And the question is, why is it that it's inappropriate to request of God on Shabbos? This is especially sharpened in light of the words of the Rambam that says that in order to fulfill the basic obligation of davening once a day, every day, biblically, you have to have, and I quote, one bachol shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, first praise God, and then request of God, and finally, noten shevach v'odei al Hashem, you give praise to God. So, why is it missing in davening? Why indeed is it inappropriate on Shabbos to request of God? So, on this issue, there's actually a machloket between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. The Babylonian Talmud in Masechet Brachot, Daf Kaf Aleph, Amud Aleph 21a, actually comes to the conclusion as follows: that if you, by mistake, start saying the weekday Amidah on Shabbos, you actually finish that bracha, and then go back to the Shabbos Amidah. So say you're standing at Ma'ariv, and you start saying, then you look around the shul, see everyone's dressed in a suit and tie, and say, oh my gosh, it's Shabbos, wrong Amidah. You finish the bracha, and then go back to the Friday night davening, Atakidashta. Why, says the Gemara? The person actually is obligated in all the 18 or 19 blessings of the Amidah, including the request. But Rabbananu delo itrichu mikvot Shabbat. But the rabbis didn't want to bother you on Shabbos. What that means, we'll get back to, but obviously it means there's an exemption of some sort on Shabbos. But that's not the way the Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, understands it. The Talmud Yerushalmi in Masechet Shabbos, Perek Tetvav, subdivision Gimel, actually says, Asur litvoa tzrachav b'Shabbat. It is forbidden to actually request on Shabbos. It's not an exemption not to bother you, as the Babylonian Talmud said, as the Bavli said, but rather it is asur. Now there's a ramification between the two, obviously, and that is when we start requesting again. When we start requesting again, it's going to be after Shabbos at Ma'ariv. So why is it that in Ma'ariv we start saying the Atachon Antanu, the Havdalah that we say in davening in the first blessing, Atachonein la'adam da'at? Obviously the answer is going to be different in the Babylonian Talmud from the Jerusalem Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud, the Talmud Bavli, will say, well, since you're allowed to say it on Shabbos, there's no need to make Havdalah before saying the blessings of petition, and therefore it has to give two different reasons, which it does. In Masechet Brachot Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, Amar Rav Yosef, mitoch shehi chokhmah, kfarua beberkat chokhmah. Why is it that Havdalah is in Atachonein la'adam da'at? Simply because in order to distinguish between things, Havdalah, that's what the word means, you need to have seichel, you need to have a brain, and therefore it's in the bracha that talks about God give me wisdom. Rabbanan Amri, but the majority opinion says, mitoch shehi chol, lefikach kavod beberkat chol. It happens to be the first bracha. If it wasn't the first bracha, we wouldn't say it, but it's the first bracha there. It's the first weekday bracha, the first vachadika bracha, so we put it there. What do you think the Jerusalem Talmud is going to say? Since the Jerusalem Talmud said it's absolutely forbidden to petition on Shabbos, it can't simply say, well, that's the first one on the list. Well, you need chokhmah. No, it says very simply, Kama Damar, Asur la'asot melachat she'yavdil. You're not allowed to do malacha until you make Havdalah. Therefore, tuchta, same thing. Asur lo litvar tzrachav ad she'yavdil. You're not allowed to start requesting before you make Havdalah. So therefore, you start the Amidah as you did on Shabbos, and the minute you want to go and transition into the 13 blessings of petition, you must make Havdalah first, simply because without it, you cannot petition God. Because until you make Havdalah, from your perspective, it's Shabbos, and one of the prohibitions of Shabbos is not to petition. It would be tanamant to putting on the light before making Havdalah. You can't do it. Same thing here. You cannot do anything that's weekday oriented, that's forbidden on Shabbos, until you make Havdalah, and you have to make it at Atachonein la'adam da'at, which is right at the beginning before you start the blessings of petition. So what we saw until now is a difference of opinion between the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. According to the Babylonian Talmud, we should have said the blessings of petition of Shabbos, but God didn't want to bother us. But according to the Jerusalem Talmud, actually it's forbidden. But the question is, what does the Babylonian Talmud mean? Because at the end of the day, we do paskin that way. The Shulchan Aruch paskins this way: that indeed, if you made a mistake on Shabbos, you finish that bracha, and then you go on to the brachas of Shabbos, simply because it is appropriate on Shabbos. We just didn't want to bother you. As the Magen Avram says, you should have said all the 19 blessings on Shabbos. Ela mishum kvod Shabbat, in honor of Shabbos, lo yitrichuhu rabbanan, they didn't want to bother you. So what does it mean not to bother you on Shabbos? What does the Babylonian Talmud mean? I believe it cannot mean that they didn't want to make davening long. After all, the Ramah Paskins noagim larbot bizmirot shel Shabbat b'chol makom lefi minhago. Indeed, you can go ahead and have a longer Pesukei de Zimra, each place based on its minhag, which is what we do. We have a longer Pesukei de Zimra. If indeed the rabbis wanted us out of shul quick on Shabbos, they wouldn't have made davening so long with a long Pesukei de Zimra and many other things that we added to davening. It can't mean that. That's the Tosefet Shabbat. Rabbi Meislish says on those words of the Ramah, that even though the Gemara says that they didn't want to bother us, lo yitruchu rabbanan, היינו לעניין ברכות אמצעיות שבתפילה לא שייך בהו כבוד שבת, אבל זמירות שהם גם כן כבוד שבת, שפר נהוג להוסיף. Namely, it can't mean that they didn't want to bother you in terms of timing, because if that was the case, then obviously davening would have been shorter, as would be Pesukei de Zimra. But that's not the case. So what does it mean they didn't want to bother us on Shabbos? I believe the answer is something totally different. And let's quote from the Sefer HaManhig. The Sefer HaManhig, the first frequent traveler that I know of in the history of the Jewish people, Rav Yarchi, comes along and says, Perush shelo yitzta'er, she'im haya lo choleh omer bebekat cholim, ve'im haya tzarich lepanasa omer bebekat hashanim. Namely, if you would have said the weekday blessings on Shabbos, you would have remembered everything you lack. And if you remember everything you lack, you'd start saying, oh my gosh, I need this and I need that. And that is actually the opposite of the Shabbos experience. The Shabbos experience should be one in which you don't think about what you lack, but you enjoy what you have. I didn't want you to start thinking about what you lack, because it would bring you to tsa'ar. It would bring you to anguish of, oh my gosh, I need this and I need that. Obviously, pikuach nefesh, it makes no difference. Those needs are front and center. But if it's not pikuach nefesh, then we don't want you to start thinking about what you lack on Shabbos, but rather what you have. And indeed, the Midrash Tanchuma that we quoted yesterday says, She'im yelech choleh betoch beito v'nizkar bo ofech choleh Yisrael v'hu meitzer. Indeed, if you think about someone that's sick, not dangerously ill, but someone that's in bed, you're going to start thinking about, oh my gosh, there's no doctors today, there's no medicine today, and all you're going to do is have anguish. V'hashabat nitna liYisrael likdusha le'oneg v'limnucha v'lo letzar. But Shabbos rather was given to the Jewish people for, I quote, sanctity, enjoyment, rest, and not for anguish. That's exactly, probably, what Rashi means on Chumash. When Rashi explains that for 6 days in the 10 Commandments you shall do all melacha, says Rashi, Kishetavo Shabbat, when Shabbos comes, Yeh beinecha ki'ilu melachtecha asuya. It should be as if all your job is done for the week. You've done everything you can, and now enjoy it. It's very much like a proper vacation. Not a vacation where you're sitting on a lounge chair with a computer in one hand and your cell phone in the other, but a real vacation where you're totally disconnected from the world. And you basically say, I made money this year, I put it in the bank, and now I'm enjoying it. And I'm not thinking about what I lack. And that's what the Gemara means, Lo yitrichu rabbanan. We didn't want to matriach you. We didn't want to bother you with all that you lack, but rather have you enjoy what you have.